Welcome back. So we're going to take a look at some different phases of inquiry, some different aspects of inquiry, beginning with the first one that you see on the screen there. So if you recall, Dewey has just introduced the nature of inquiry, how he sees and defines inquiry. His definition, again, is that inquiry is the controlled or directed transformation of an indeterminate situation into one that is so determinate in its constituent distinctions and relations as to convert the elements of the original situation into a unified whole. So you're analyzing a situation that is hazy, uncertain. We're not sure what to do. It's indeterminate, not sure how the different parts of it fit together. So you're analyzing that and turning it into a determinate situation, a situation where things hang together, where you seem to have an explanation of what's happening, an understanding of what to do in that situation. So transforming an indeterminate situation through inquiry into a determinate situation. And now there's different parts of that process that we're going to look at, beginning with number 1, the antecedent conditions of inquiry, the indeterminate situation. So what starts off the inquiry? So Dewey writes, inquiry and questioning up to a certain point are synonymous terms. These two words, inquiry, questioning, have overlapping meanings, we might say. So we inquire when we question, and we inquire when we seek for whatever will provide an answer to a question asked. Thus, it is of the very nature of the indeterminate situation which evokes inquiry to be questionable. So a situation that leads to inquiry is a questionable situation, or, in terms of actuality instead of potentiality, to be uncertain, unsettled, disturbed. So these are qualities of a situation that evokes inquiry. The peculiar quality of what pervades the given materials, constituting them a situation, is not just uncertainty at large. It is a unique doubtfulness, which makes that situation to be just and only the situation it is. And you may recall that Dewey has defined a situation earlier as being united by a particular quality of experience. You might think of equality as kind of like a feeling, a particular feeling that is to talk about it subjectively, maybe, but different situations give you different feelings, which evoke different responses. And the situation of inquiry is going to evoke a particular kind of doubtfulness or uncertainty. Of course, each situation is different, so the feeling will be slightly different, but that's why he calls it a unique doubtfulness in any case. It is this unique quality that not only evokes the particular inquiry engaged in, but that exercises control over its special procedures. So again, this controlling feeling, again to speak maybe more subjectively, evokes a particular kind of inquiry. Each situation is different. Each situation might call up or require, necessitate a different type of inquiry to be engaged in, different procedures, which are going to be related to the particular qualities of the situation as we experience it. Let's see. Otherwise, one procedure in inquiry would be as likely to occur and to be effective as any other. Right? So if all situations of inquiry, if all uncertain situations felt the same, then you could use the same, we would tend to use the same procedures, right? But they're going to, existential situations, actually existing situations are always going to be slightly different. They might be very, very similar, so we'll use a similar kind of inquiry, a similar procedure to solve them. But if the qualities evoked are different, noticeably different, other procedures will be suggested to us. Unless a situation is uniquely qualified in its very indeterminateness, there is a condition of complete panic. Response to it takes the form of blind and wild overt activities. So if it's just indeterminate, but we don't have a particular grasp on it, then we're likely to panic. If we can't get a grasp on what procedures we should use, if we can't determine the quality of the situation, if it's just generally overwhelmingly indeterminate, there is a condition of complete panic, he says, where we're kind of blind, we're fumbling around, not sure how even to begin. Stating the matter from the personal side, we have lost our heads. A variety of names serve to characterize indeterminate situations. They are disturbed, troubled, ambiguous, confused, full of conflicting tendencies, obscure, etc. So these name different qualities of indeterminate situations, right? Indeterminate situations come in all shapes and sizes, all different having all different kinds of characteristics, and we tend to label them using different words. It is the situation, Dewey says, it is the situation that has these traits. We are doubtful because the situation is inherently doubtful. So a theme that we'll see come up again, and have already seen come up, is that situations cannot be defined independently of some person who is in the situation, of some organism in the environment, right? The environment cannot be defined independently of the organism. The situation cannot be defined independently of the agent, of the person experiencing the situation. So the situation is to us doubtful, and that makes us doubtful. When we analyze out the feeling, we might, there's a tendency to analyze out the feeling and apply it just to the person who is having the feeling, but the feeling is intrinsically related to the situation as experienced. Personal states of doubt that are not evoked by and are not relative to some existential situation are pathological. So when you have a feeling that you cannot relate to the situation that you find yourself in, now we're talking about pathology. When they are extreme, they constitute the mania of doubting. Consequently, situations that are disturbed and troubled, confused or obscure, cannot be straightened out, cleared up, and put in order by manipulation of our personal states of mind. So he's saying that it's not just all in your head. I mean, if it is just all in your head, then it's a pathology. There's something going wrong with you as an organism. But actual situations that evoke inquiry, that are troubled or confused, ambiguous, and so on, you actually have to change the situation, change the stuff of the situation to clear it up. You can't just manipulate your mind if it's a legitimate situation and not just a kind of insanity. And I don't know how you would always distinguish these. I don't know exactly how Dewey would go about distinguishing these. He doesn't talk a lot, as I recall from what I have noticed in reading Dewey. He doesn't spend a lot of time talking about pathologies. He does mention it from time to time, but it's not like a big theme with him, so I don't know exactly how you would want to go about distinguishing pathological cases of doubting or skepticism from maybe more legitimate cases. In any case, we'll continue. The attempt to settle them by such manipulations involves what psychiatrists call withdrawal from reality. Such an attempt is pathological as far as it goes, and when it goes far, it is the source of some form of actual insanity. So I guess when you stop trying to change the situation and try just to change your habits of mind, your ways of thinking and feeling, then it becomes pathological, or when you can no longer count on changing the situation, when you are no longer able to change the situation, you have no power to change the situation, you're forced back into yourself. Maybe that is a kind of insanity or incipient insanity or something. The habit of disposing of the doubtful as if it belonged only to us, rather than to the existential situation in which we are caught and implicated, is an inheritance from subjectivistic psychology. Sorry, just checking the footnotes here. The biological antecedent conditions of an unsettled situation are involved in that state of imbalance in organic environmental interactions, which has already been described. So here's a footnote that refers us back to pages 32 through 34 if you want to check those on a previous video. I don't remember which episode it is, but pages 32 to 34. Especially, I would say that this comes in at the bottom of page 33, where he starts talking about the balance of organism environment and where the balance becomes disturbed. And you have this need, search, fulfillment kind of process taking place in the organism. Needs are discovered. There's too much or too little of something in the environment, so the organism has a need for more of this, less of this, warmer temperature, colder temperature, more food, less toxins, whatever. And then there's a search behavior, and then when that is successful, there's a state of fulfillment or satisfaction. So he's talking about this kind of state of imbalance of organismic environmental interactions, which he's talked about before. Restoration of integration can be affected in one case as in the other only by operations which actually modify existing conditions, not by merely mental processes. All right, I think I've talked about that enough to the extent that I quite understand the distinction being drawn here between a kind of a purely mental uncertainty and an actual uncertainty in the situation, in the experience of an actual situation that can be changed. All right. It is accordingly a mistake to suppose that a situation is doubtful only in a subjective sense. The notion that in actual existence everything is completely determinate has been rendered questionable by the progress of physical science itself. So now we get a little bit into the issue of determinism, which here means, is there a specific cause you can point to for everything? In a kind of Newtonian sense, where there's an action and a determinate reaction based on the particular characteristics of that action, the particular measurable characteristics of that action. There should be a reaction that is kind of mathematically follows from that. But he says this has been rendered questionable by progress of physical science, and here I think he's alluding to advances in quantum physics, which were starting to become known around this time. So even if it had not been, even if this kind of determinism, maybe kind of simplistic determinism, had not been called into question by advances in science, complete determination would not hold of existences as an environment. So it gets hard to talk about determinism when you're talking about environments, right? So it's easy to think about it in a kind of billiard ball kind of way, where you've got two objects, one with a certain kind of force interacting with another object, and there's a kind of mathematical relation, or relatively simple mathematical relation between the activities of each one. But when you start talking about whole environments, it becomes questionable to talk about determination in that sense. Dewey continues, for nature is an environment only as it is involved in interaction with an organism or self, or whatever name be used. This gets at the concept of what in German has been called the Umwelt. This is an idea that also comes about around this time, basically all following from Darwinian insights that the organism and the environment are kind of mutually determining. So it's not really a case of one object acting on another, causing a reaction, which acts on another object and it has another reaction and so forth, but you've got this more ecological context going on where there's an indefinite number of factors all influencing each other at the same time. So it doesn't make sense even to talk about determinism at that point, at least in the kind of traditional sense of determinism that Dewey is pushing aside. The footnote here is maybe important to read. It's a little bit more of a meaty footnote than you often see. So I'll look at footnote 4 here, following from the sentence that nature is an environment only as it is involved in interaction with an organism. I should also mention that Dewey might in the future prefer the word transaction here. Later, he'll distinguish more between interactionism and transactionism. And here he's expressing more of a transactional view. He uses the words kind of interchangeably in the logic, and then other works he kind of distinguishes between them. Anyway, footnote 4, he says, except of course a purely mentalistic name like consciousness. So Dewey would not want to say that nature is an environment only as it is involved in interaction with a consciousness. He would want a more substantial word. Organism is good. Self, I don't know. For me, self gets a little bit abstract too, because so many philosophers use it as a word very similar in nature to consciousness. Anyway, going on with the footnote, he says that the alleged problem of interactionism versus automatism, parallelism, etc. So he's talking about interactionism as a theory of mind, where you've got a mental and physical part which need to interact, as opposed to automatism or epiphenomenalism, where there's a physical part which is subject to causation, and then a mental part which is not, or which just kind of like goes along with the physical part. And then parallelism, where you've got parallel physical and mental parts, but they don't interact. Anyway, so the alleged problem of interactionism versus automatism, parallelism, etc., is a problem and an insoluble one because of the assumption involved in its statement. So there's an assumption in these different theories of mind which make them insoluble. The assumption, namely, that the interaction in question is with something mental instead of with biological, cultural human beings. So we're trying to get away from this idea of a separate mental substance or mental domain that is distinguished from the biological and the cultural and the environmental. If you take that assumption that there's this special mental domain or mental substance, then you get into various kinds of insoluble problems. Anyway, that's not a major point right now, but I thought it was worth mentioning as it's a more substantial footnote than Dewey often gives. Anyway, continuing on with this section, every such interaction is a temporal process, not a momentary cross-sectional occurrence. So we're not looking at a slice of time, but an ongoing process when we're talking about the interaction of an organism with its environing conditions. And that also makes it much less deterministic in that traditional sense. The situation in which it occurs is indeterminate, therefore, with respect to its issue, with respect to what is going to be the result, what will be the outcome. This is indeterminate in respect with that outcome. We don't know what the outcome should be or will be. If we call it confused, then it meant that its outcome cannot be anticipated. If it is called obscure, then its course of movement permits of final consequences that cannot be clearly made out. It is called conflicting when it tends to evoke discordant responses that cannot be made compatible. You can't really do both of them. You have to choose one or the other, and they're very different things. Even were existential conditions unqualifiedly determinate in and of themselves, they are indeterminate in significance. So, unqualifiedly determinate in and of themselves. So if the conditions, we could kind of know what they are, how they're related. they would still be indeterminate in this kind of situation in terms of their meaning or value. So Dewey here says significance. I should have checked again whether he distinguishes significance from other things, which he does. I kind of forgot exactly. That's in a previous video. But kind of the meaning for the organism or the value, sometimes people use significance to mean as a kind of synonym for the value for some creature. And Dewey has made a distinction earlier. It might be worth checking on that. Anyway, that is in what they import and portend in their interaction with the organism. So what is their import for the organism? So we might understand the situation, but not understand why it's important for the actual individuals in it. What is the meaning for the actual individuals in it? The organic responses that enter into the production of the state of affairs that is temporally later and sequential are just as existential as are the environing conditions. This is all existential stuff, right? And to finish up here, it says the immediate locus of the problem concerns, then, what kind of responses the organism shall make. So the immediate problem in an uncertain situation is what are we going to do? It's not just, well, I don't understand this situation. We don't understand it because we don't know what we're supposed to do in that situation. It concerns the interaction of organic responses and environing conditions in their movement toward an existential issue, right? So toward an actually existing outcome. What are we actually going to do? What are we going to change? What are we going to manipulate? What are we going to try to transform into another thing to make this situation determinate, to give us an outcome that we want? It is a commonplace that in any troubled state of affairs, things will come out differently according to what is done. So we have to choose about what to do. We have to figure out what to do, make a decision, do this rather than that, because what we do matters. The farmer won't get grain unless he plants and tills. The general will win or lose the battle according to the way he conducts it, and so on. Neither the grain nor the tilling, neither the outcome of the battle nor the conduct of it are mental events, right? It's all existential stuff, existing stuff in the world, whether you want to call it material or physical or whatever. Dewey tends to say existential, actually existing, whatever that means. Organic interaction becomes inquiry when existential consequences are anticipated, when actually existing changes are anticipated, are expected. When environing conditions are examined with reference to their potentialities, and when responsive activities are selected and ordered with reference to actualization of some of the potentialities rather than others in a final existential situation. So we're looking, what is the potential of this situation? What is likely to happen if we do this or that? What likely response are we going to get? What likely outcome? And then we're choosing, right, when responsive activities are selected and ordered. So we're choosing what to do, when to do what, how to, what pattern of actions are we going to take, what should we do first, next, and so forth, in order to get actualization, in order to get some real thing happening out of the potentials of the situation. Resolution of the indeterminate situation is active and operational. So we actually have to do stuff, operate on the environment. If the inquiry is adequately directed, the final issue is the unified situation that has been mentioned. So again, we're trying to get from a kind of fractured, fragmented, uncertain, broken situation to a unified situation where things hang together, where we can explain what's going on, where we can make a kind of likely predictions as to what is going to happen, where we get expected consequences to our actions, and things of that nature. All right, so we'll stop here, and in the next video we will take up Part 2, Institution of a Problem.